The Supreme Court could play a really big role when it comes to the Trump presidency. I'm not referring to the conservative justices he's appointed. I'm talking about the cases involving the president that they have decided to take on. Now, the High Court, they will hear arguments and rule by the end of June on whether or not Trump can continue to keep his financial records and tax returns out of the hands of prosecutors as well as Congress. An opinion piece in the New York Times by Linda Greenhouse, who focuses on the Supreme Court, she describes the political ramifications of this. Quote, "The eventual decisions will give the country much needed clarity about the Supreme Court. With the court in the full glare of an election year spotlight, we will learn beyond any doubt what kind of Supreme Court we have and whether its evolution into partnership with a president who acts as if he owns it is now complete." Now, on top of that, Chief Justice John Roberts, he will preside over the Senate impeachment trial, so he obviously will be a factor. How involved? Well, we shall see. Former federal prosecutor Mimi Rocah joins us to discuss, and Mimi is also running for district attorney of Westchester, and we're going to be talking about that in just a little bit. Mimi, it surprised some. I'm wondering if it surprised you when they decided to take on cases that seem to be settled laws related to the returns. And I've heard two different schools of thought. Some saying, well, this could be potential trouble here. They had an out. They chose to take this on. And others saying, no, finally, we're going to get some clarity over executive power and where it starts and stops and whether or not the president can decide on his own here what he or she chooses to share or not.
Yeah, look, I think had they not taken these cases, that would have been almost easy win, really, for people who believe that we should see what is going on with the president's financial situation. The fact that they did take the cases doesn't mean, though, no one should read into that, that they are going to rule in favor of the president. The legal arguments, the case on the merits, to me, seems very clear-cut, not in favor of the president. I can understand why, on the topic, they would feel the need to step in, especially given that it keeps coming up. It's already in 3 cases before them, and it's going, you know, particularly if Trump is reelected, this is going to come up over and over again. So they feel the need to step in and provide some clarity.
To that end, what kind of clarity will they give us? Will it be specific related to just the tax returns, or will they codify, if you will, that there are things like checks and balances and that a president just can't say no?
Well, I mean, courts normally like to only rule as broadly as they have to. So, you know, I think that it is possible it will only relate not just to financial subpoenas, but the idea of when a president can be investigated. And here, the mix of cases that they've taken relates to criminal cases and criminal proceedings and congressional proceedings. So we will, you know, that is pretty broad in and of itself. So I think that even if they just stick to sort of the factual scenario in front of them, we're going to get a pretty clear picture of where the court is right now on that.
When I've spoken to clerks for Supreme Court justices, they say one of the mistakes is just because the justices are very careful to never speak publicly or give his partisan opinions, etc., don't think that they're not cognizant about what's going out there. So when the president says something to the equivalent of, you know, Article 2 says I can do whatever I want, his own counsel says he could shoot somebody at Fifth Avenue and he couldn't be held liable, that does resonate with the court. But as Linda Greenhouse put in her piece, this is going to be a test in many ways, because Justice Roberts does not want the court to be seen as a political arm like the House or the Senate is, or the legislative branch. He's concerned about the reputation, longstanding of the court going forward. Are we going to learn a lot about the court one way or the other here, that if they become a political appendage?
I think so. I mean, remember, Roberts, we've talked about this before, but Roberts is the one who came out when Trump was out there criticizing judges and saying they were Bush judges or Clinton judges or Obama judges, and he put out that statement that was short and to the point, but very well said. There are no Bush, Obama, Clinton judges. There are, you know, judges on the bench trying to do their best to follow the law and follow the facts.
There's some recent numbers. Circuit courts have been remade substantially in the last 3 years. Are we going to look back, you know, even after these 4 years, and who knows the next 4, just how much the courts had been remade in a very hardline Republican way. I mean, we had one court in particular talking about how it's changing right before our eyes, the makeup of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are. We're going to feel this for a long time. But one thing I'll say, one thing that gives me hope is, so far with respect to the Trump administration, the courts have really held, right? I mean, every time we've had a court ruling on anything, from whether it be a criminal case in the Russia probe to immigration, lawsuits about Trump, sort of the hateful immigration policies, they've pretty much ruled against him because they take extreme legal positions. Part of that is because we have a bench right now that has been appointed by presidents from both parties, but reasonable jurors that most politicians could agree on confirming. But part of it is also that when someone becomes a judge, I do think that the magnitude of that position and the power and the responsibility can have an impact on a person. And so maybe we will see that with this generation.
I will say there's been a few nominations here with some folks that are frighteningly unqualified, it seems, for some of those positions. Finally, your old stomping grounds, the Southern District of New York. We've heard a lot of things after Mueller wrapped up that things were being farmed out, active cases, to other district courts. I haven't heard anything since, but is there a possibility we're not talking about investigations? And when you look at timetables, remember what happened obviously right before 16. People were yelling bloody murder after the fact. Well, if you had that, why didn't you come forward with it beforehand? Or you shouldn't have sat. That would have been, the depository information for a potential voter to know. Is there a chance we will still hear that maybe one of these probes in 2020 all of a sudden becomes a major election issue here, whether it's the inauguration probe, it's charitable probe, so many of these questions we never got clarity on from Mueller. Is there a chance next year they will be?
I think so. I mean, we're still we're still far enough away that I don't think the Southern District in any way should be prohibited from bringing charges in any of those investigations you mentioned. And one in particular that really comes to mind is Rudy Giuliani. I mean, it is so obvious, that he is, he's now entered into a joint defense agreement himself with one of the charged people. So even he, through all of his denial, is acknowledging that he is essentially a target of an investigation there. Why he hasn't been charged yet, even I'm scratching my head a little bit. I do know that it's different. What looks to be bad in criminal behavior, it's different when you actually have to meet the elements of a crime and bring an indictment. But I've said this before, and I'll say it again, I would be very surprised if he was not charged. And when that happens, if that happens, that's going to draw a lot more information. I mean, there's so many dots to be connected between him and Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman and Donald Trump and Dmitry Firtash, the oligarch in Russia. So, and
I keep coming back to that line that Rudy said when somebody said, the president has a habit of cutting people loose when they become inconvenient. He goes, "Don't worry, I've got insurance."
Exactly.
You can't make these things up here. Maybe. All right. When we come back, Mimi and I are going to discuss her race for DA of Westchester and also some of the key issues she's focusing on that I think matters to everybody here, regardless of what side of the political aisle you find yourself on. Stay with us.